Welcome again, everyone. My name is Shireen Khosropour. I'm a psychology professor at Austin Community College. I'm also here in my role as director of the Center for Peace and Conflict Studies at Austin Community College. We have a number of programs at the center. Leila will drop a link to our events page, and we welcome people from the community, people from obviously ACC and our sister institution, UT, to join us at any of those events. You can also there, if you're part of Babak's class and interested in film, you can find the recordings of our previous film discussions and links to where you might be able to watch those films on your own and then view the discussions. Leila, would you like to say something?
I'm all right. I just dropped the link in the chat, as Shireen mentioned I would, and you'll find on that page information about both of our Peace and Relationship series and our Cinema of Conflict and Transformation series, which this event tonight is a part of. So thank you for joining us, and I'm happy to turn it over to Mark if we're ready for that. Is that okay?
Yes.
Hello, everybody. I am Dr. Mark Cunningham. I'm a professor in the radio, television, and film department. And so I work with Shireen and Leila to put this together. And this is our second semester, or second, not semester, but year doing this. And so it's been, I'll speak for myself, it's been such an education for me to talk about these films, to be introduced to films I'd never seen before myself. And to be able to dialogue with experts in these areas, in terms of subject matter wise. And so I have a PhD in film and media studies, or radio, television, and film from the University of Texas at Austin. I wrote my dissertation on race, gender, and narrative in John Singleton's self-described Hood trilogy of films, which is that are set in South Central Los Angeles, Boys in the Hood, Poetic Justice, and Baby Boy. In January, I submitted the first draft of my book about Singleton. So I'm just waiting to hear back about the rewrites and everything. So yeah, it's an exciting time for me in terms of film and whatever. And it's exciting for me to be able to do this series. And so with that, I'd like to introduce our guest today, Babak Tabarraee. Who is going to talk to us today about the film No One Knows About Persian Cats, which I'm sure you all have seen or are familiar with. I know this is the focus of the discussion. So Babak, if you go ahead and give us, introduce yourself to us, please. I hope I said your last name correctly. I'm sorry.
Yes. I would have rather that my name would have been Barak, but Babak is fine.
Babak, I said Barak, and I'm so sorry.
That would have been perfect, though.
Yeah.
No, that's totally fine. Hi, everyone. First of all, thank you very much to Shireen and Leila and Mark for making this event and for inviting me to this fantastic event. And thank you. I think I took a look at what the other titles in the series about for the Center for Peace and Conflict Studies there at ACC, and they look amazing. And thank you very much for inviting me today here, and I'm so happy to see many familiar faces from my classes at UT. So my name is Babak Tabarraee. I am from Iran. I'm not a first-generation immigrant because my father immigrated to the United States right before the revolution of Iran in 1979. But after the revolution, he thought that, I have to go back to the country and serve my country. So he went back, got married, and voila, I'm here. But he's still there. My background, my educational background is in theater, is in screenwriting and playwriting. Then I got a graduate degree in film studies, and I got my PhD in Middle Eastern languages and cultures in 2020 from UT Austin. My area of research, my area of interest, my area of teaching is cinema, is film, but also literature to some degree, because I used to work as a translator, as a literary translator back in Iran. I came to the States in 2016, so this is my 6th year of living as a first-generation immigrant, basically here. And I'm happy to be here and talking to you about کسی از گربه‌های ایرانی خبر نداره, or no one knows about Persian cats.
All right, well, we got a little bit of a parallel there with literature. I was a English teacher in public school for 18 years. So
wow.
Before it, and you know, and spent 8 years doing this and teaching public school at the same time until I got on full time here. So nice to talk to a fellow literature aligned person there.
Yeah, it's great to virtually meet you.
Good deal. So I want to start the discussion off just with a more general question. So, you know, outside of, in terms of Iranian filmmakers, right? I mean, mostly in the United States, we hear about, you know, Abbas Kiarostami, or we hear about Asghar Farhadi, right? Particularly of late with his, you know, Oscar wins. But why is it that, you know, we don't often have access to films from Iran or the Middle East here in America?
Yeah, of course. You know, that's a very important question, I think. Just to add to the weight of your question, a couple of months ago when Shireen and Leila contacted me about this event, the initial idea was that, hey, we are getting closer to Nowruz, which is the beginning of Iranian New Year. It happens on March 21st every year. It's the beginning of the spring. It's the vernal equinox. So we were thinking about having a film about Nowruz, but a film that is kind of not very gloomy or doesn't represent the bleak aspects of life in Iran. So we found the movie, but then that film was not available to us. Then I did a little bit of research myself to see what films in the history of Iranian cinema have talked about Nowruz. Nowruz is the most important celebration in Iran. And at least, you should know that at least since the late 1940s, each year, on average, about 60 movies or more than 60 movies per year have been made in Iran for theatrical release, which is, I know compared to the United States or India, it wouldn't be that much, but comparing with other parts of the world, Iranian film industry is one of the most prolific film industries in the world. So among those thousands of films, more than 2,000-3,000 of films, the titles that really dealt with the idea of Nowruz or celebration, they were scarce. It tells us something about Iranian culture, a culture that unfortunately, especially over the past few decades, have been celebrating sadness and mourning more than happiness and celebration. But there were still several titles about Nowruz. We couldn't access them. The distributors, the international distributors that distribute international movies, they usually pick films for educational institutes, such as ours, ACC or UT or other institutes, for selling the movies to the libraries or to platforms such as Swank, such as Canopy, other kind of platforms that make these films available to us, or even to more popular platforms such as Netflix, Amazon, Hulu, etc. And it is interesting that exactly what you said is repeated in many of these platforms. Maybe because of the success of some of the Iranian filmmakers in the international film festival circuits, including Abbas Kiarostami and Asghar Farhadi. Maybe because of the history of animosity between the two countries, which has made cultural exchanges between the two countries rarer and more scarce every year. And maybe partly because of our fault in the academy, because we tend to choose films for our syllabi and extracurricular activities that kind of align with the theories in which we are trained in, or the social movements that we are living in. So maybe because of that, we don't get to see the majority of the films that are made in the Middle East and other parts of the world for the consumption of the people in those countries. Because I can easily tell you that maybe less than 10% of Iranian films are art films. Maybe less than 10% of them are about the resistance of people against different forms of control or power. These films are very important, very much appreciated inside and outside the country. They should be taught, they should be discussed. So no question about that. But it is sad to see that maybe we don't get to see maybe 80% of the overall products of the film industry in another country, which is basically not only quantity-wise, but based on the reception of those films, based on their status in the box office charts of the country. Those films may tell us a lot about the national psyche or the social movements, the social trends, what the government allows to be represented, and what people really want to watch. I think it is as much important to watch films by Scorsese, Spike Lee, Woody Allen, Coppola, other great American filmmakers, as it is to watch Marvel products, because that tells us something about American culture too. However, unfortunately, our access to those films from other countries are very much limited, and access always brings with it the question of control and power. So in the end, I am happy that we chose this film. This film was not released in Iran, of course. It was banned immediately. But it won an important award in Cannes Film Festival, and certain regard. It was watched and received well in the underground market in Iran, but it was never released in the country. But still, it gives us a very good glimpse of what life in Iran for a generation of young people might be like. And for these reasons, I am happy with this final selection, but I should have said all of this before continuing the discussion.
Well, I mean, it's part of the education, I think, for all of us here, certainly for myself. I'm gonna speak for myself on things like that, for sure. But, it's really interesting. You kind of talk about how, again, the difficulty for all of the reasons you just mentioned, right? That we are sometimes less likely to see Iranian or Middle Eastern film product in America. But I noticed in the film, right, the opposite, right? That there's a lot of American influence on the popular culture interests of the young Iranians that we see in the film. So could you speak a little to the struggles with cultural imperialism in Iran and how, such is addressed there?
Absolutely, absolutely. I mean, before that, let me tell you this. I was telling someone else, in another event quite recently, maybe even yesterday, that when I was in Iran, everybody thought that it was in our media and migration class, maybe, that when I was in Iran, everybody thought that I was completely West-struck. I listened to foreign music, read American novels, watched foreign movies, but when I'm here, I became completely the Iranian guy who reads only stuff from his country. So this is an important issue, of course, Mark. So a little bit about the history of Iran-US relations over the past century or so. Is important to know that in the first half of the century, Iran and the US were allies, were friends, and there was direct and open channels of cultural exchange between the two countries. After the 1979 revolution, it completely changed, but to the opposite way. But still, that history still is being carried over. We should know that for more than 100 years, maybe for 200 years now, there has been two different attitudes among Iranians about their relationship to the West in general, including the United States. One attitude that gained power around the late 19th century, early 20th century with the intellectuals of the constitutional revolution in Iran, which was a small revolution in which the monarchy became a kind of conditional monarchy, conditioned to the parliament vote for different things. So the intellectuals of back then, they thought that the reason that Iran is not as advanced a country as many Western countries is that a lot of our traditions have hindered our kind of progress. So they thought, and there is a famous quote there, that we should become Westernized from head to toe. And this was their motto. And many things changed after that because these intellectuals came into power. Then there was a change in the royal dynasty in Iran from the Qajars to the Pahlavi. The Pahlavi system, the Pahlavi Shahs, the last two Shahs of Iran, the last two kings of Iran, they were very much pro-Western. So they tried to impose this top-down model of modernization a la Westernization. Then there was another group of intellectuals who gained power, especially in the 50s, 60s, and finally 70s, who were completely anti-imperialist. They were coming from Islamist roots and leftist roots, and the overall sense of anti-imperialism that was prevalent all around the world back then, of course. And they were talking about this idea of West-struckness, that anybody who is acting like Westerners in this country is kind of betraying their own traditional and cultural and religious traditions. So completely two contrasting forces. After the revolution, one side won, one side went down to the underground. So what happens, of course, you are the experts about conflict and peace, but what happens in Iran is that just like when you are banned from reaching something and you become more eager, more thirsty for that thing, this interest in accessing Western products increased after the revolution, despite the many kinds of mutual sanctions between the two countries. Here's an example. The import of all American films to Iran was halted in the early 1980s. And to this date, it is not, legally you cannot bring American films to Iran. However, the underground market was very powerful. An example of that underground market is the character of Nader in this very film that we watched. He is a film dealer. Yeah. He has these different DVDs of movies to bring to the houses of people and distribute them. And I would argue, I mean, at least in my case, I used to watch more American films back in Iran than when I'm here, because I had cheap access to all these bootleg DVDs, digital files, and even before that, to the VHS tapes of all these films. And the same goes with music. So yes, there is this tendency, not only among the government and the state, but different layers of people in Iran, that not only shouldn't we become Westernized, but also we should resist this kind of cultural imperialism as much as we can. And there is another group that say, but they force us not to watch these films. So we want to watch them. We want to listen to this kind of music. So it is a battle, basically, between different groups of people. And it's not really as much top button top anymore. It's different groups of people. But the resistance, and it is interesting that the concept of resistance exists among both groups, and both groups call themselves resistant to different kinds of power, cultural power.
Okay, cool. So just want to mention really quickly before I went to the next thing. Yafir, I see you have a question here. If you hold off, I'm not going to forget you. I'll come back to that toward the end when we start taking questions and answers. Is that okay? You cool? Okay, all right, thank you. So back to, it was interesting because I noticed that. I mean, it's so funny how, you know, the tremendous influence and the knowledge, right, that Iranians have about American popular culture versus in the opposite.
Yeah.
In America, little to no knowledge, right? So it's really interesting how that happens. But more specific to the narrative of the film, you know, how involved is the underground rock scene in Iran? So, I mean, what is the reason to discourage this from occurring there? And what do you think is the future of the underground rock scene there? Which I thought was incredibly interesting in the film. I had no idea. I knew a little something. There was a Shireen, I think, had shown, sent us a copy of a film, a short film, whatever. So I had some indication or some idea about it, but not to the extent that they talked to film.
Oh yes, there are concerts, underground concerts, and parties, and groups, and jam sessions, and all kinds of underground. I mean, I cannot say that for all the cities and all the places in Iran, but big cities such as Tehran, definitely you can see there is this kind of schizophrenic life, and on the surface you see one thing, and underground sometimes can be under roofs, of course, or different places. The life can be different. As for the music, the thing that I said about culture in general, it applies to music too. So Iran is one of those regions in the world which has some of the oldest records of having music. Like there are records of having music instruments such as harp or trumpet-like instruments for thousands of years ago. But the kind of music that Iranians were used to, at least until the early 20th century, is a kind of traditional music, which is very slow, and the rhythm is very different from the kind of music that we are accustomed to here in the West. During the Pahlavi regime and that process of modernization, westernization, little by little, different Western styles of music found their way into Iran. And especially in the 60s and 70s, pop music was really popular in Iran. There were a few rock bands too. They were not as popular as the pop music. With the revolution, something strange happened. Well, first of all, women were banned from singing altogether, as you can see in this film. But not only that, but in the first decade of the revolution or so, there was a ban on all kinds of Western style music, even pop music. My colleague, Dr. Nahid Siamdost, has a fantastic book called The Soundtrack of Revolution that I really recommend to everybody here if you're interested, and it tells you about the kinds of music that the Iranian state allowed in the first decade after the revolution, which were mostly revolutionary chants and songs that encouraged people to go to war with Iraq. But little by little, the restrictions became loosened, and we got to have pop music in the 90s, sung by male singers. And we got to have rock music not as much. The reason for that is not really known. Maybe the government sees rock music as more Western. Maybe the people are not really that much interested. Like, and when I say the people, I'm thinking about like these huge concert halls in Tehran, for example, that I have never seen a rock concert there, but I have seen in small auditoriums of colleges and universities when there are these different underground bands that suddenly they got permit for one performance and that's it. So it is partly because of the cultural politics And it is partly because of the cultural traditions, I would say, that you don't see rock music that much. It is changing a little bit. And of course, many of the songs of these rock bands or the rappers are very much sociopolitically aware, with uh, straightforward directions about the political beliefs of the songwriter and the singers in them. But they are considered a kind of threat. To this date, they are considered a kind of threat. And I think the message of the film is still fresh. Although the film is 13 years old, the message of the film is still very much fresh. And the situation hasn't really changed that much over the past decade or so.
You know, I mean, you were talking about the risk involved there in playing music. And so, you know, one of the things I thought was really, really interesting, you know, that is just been doing, I kind of went down a rabbit hole after watching this film, and, you know, listening to the soundtrack and just kind of reading up on the different bands that were featured in the film. And, you know, as we, you know, you just mentioned that, you know, members of this scene really do risk their lives for their art, right? You know, in the most, you know, truthful way, in the most romanticized way, how you want to think about this kind of risking one's life for their art is, I mean, it's everything, right? But then I read that two of the members of the Yellow Dogs who were featured in the film were murdered by a musician in Brooklyn, New York, a disgruntled musician, you know, in a place in New York where they can, you know, pursue their art fairly freely and openly. And I saw a bit of an irony in that, right? That they come to America and then they're murdered. That's what, you know. Yeah. And so what are your thoughts on that? You know, them coming to America in this way and seemingly, right?
Yeah.
The danger just is imminent in some ways, and they can openly practice their art or develop their art.
The irony is indeed there, and it is a very bitter and sad one for sure. Mm-hmm. So to give everyone a little bit of context about that, after this film was finished, many of the cast of the film left the country for good. So Ashkan and Negar are both in the UK now. Ashkan is a musician. Negar is not a musician anymore. There was this drummer of the band whose name was Arash, and there was the bass player, the guitar bass player, whose name was Kuri, Kurosh. Everybody called him Kuri. So Kuri and Arash came to the States. They formed a band with Arash's brother and a couple of other guys, and they named this band Yellow Dogs. And then there was a shooting, and unfortunately Arash and his brother and another friend of them were killed in that shooting. And it is very strange. Just a little bit of cultural context about that. First of all, Yellow Dogs, Sag Zard in Farsi. Sag Zard is part of a proverb in Persian. Sag Zard baradar shoghale. Yellow dog is the brother to a jackal, and jackal is considered a very bad animal because I don't know why, but it is not considered a good and loving animal. So it is basically when you say Sag Zard baradar shoghale, it is talking about people whom you cannot really trust. So the irony is even double there with the name of their band and what happened. Yeah. A friend killed them. So there is this very sad afterlife of the film. And Bahman Qobadi, the director, by the way, emigrated from Iran. He has been an outspoken dissident now, living in exile. When I try to digest what happened, I kind of like romantically, maybe, I connect it to the postmodern nature of the film itself. I mean, to me, this film is more than anything else a postmodern movie, and it has all the elements of postmodernism. And I can go into details about it now or later. But one of the promises of postmodernism is that there is no master narrative. and irony and parody actually work very well in the style of postmodern movies. And you see many of the examples of that in the movie too. Inside the movie, there are different kinds of irony. For example, in the beginning of the film, that other musician whose name was Babak, like my name, he was telling that girl about the guy who was singing, the director, whose previous film was banned. His current film, before even being released, is being distributed in the underground market. His future film has not got the permit for production, so he is very sad. All the things about Bahman Qobadi, and it's like a prediction about the situation of this film too. And within that conversation, actually, this guy says that his next movie about the underground rock groups in Iran, it doesn't have any professional actors, blah, 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 which is a big lie. The guy who plays the role of Nader, the film dealer, he's a superstar. And he was at the peak of his career back then. And because of his energy, the energy that he brings to the film, he makes the film alive many a time when the rhythm wants to fall down, he picks it up. So a lot of things about the narrative, about the way this film is narrated, about the use of irony in the film, about the kind of paradoxes the film displays, about the self-reflexive nature of the film, which we can find its representations in different parts. The film to me is a postmodern movie, and the afterlife of it to me is still relevant, is still related to that postmodern nature. But yeah, I mean, this is super sad. They wanted to be free, and then they come to the land of the free, and then they're dead.
Exactly. It's really, I mean, yeah, like, for lack of a better word, it is sad. I mean,
yeah,
the space to be able to do it, and then that happens. So I want to ask you some questions about the structure of the film, but before we do that, I have another question about the music. Yeah. So one of the most powerful scenes in the film to me is the rapper Hichkas.
Yes.
Right? Kind of reflecting on the more volatile natures of the streets of Tehran in his song, I think it's Ektalif, is this called?
Ektalaf, yes.
So,
yes.
So Qobadi, you know, gives it a significant set piece in the film. And there's a lot of instances in the movie where it looks like the movie cuts away into these music videos. That's how I likened it, in the middle of the narrative. But certainly this happens with him. How do you read that scene, and what do you think the director wants audiences to get from it?
Well, that's a great question. Well, first of all, among the different groups of singers in the film and the different bands, two of them were already famous when the film came out outside Iran and in the underground market in Iran. One of them was Hichkas, the other one was Rana Farhan, the woman whom we do not get to see really, but her voice is like divine. Now Hichkas, which in Farsi, by the way, means nobody, he is known as the father or the godfather of Persian rap. And we know that rap, hip hop is the music of protest all around the world, especially in the States. It is the same in Iran. And many of the rap songs, many of Persian rap songs are just different forms of music of protest. Mm-hmm. But about that scene, I have my own reading, and I will get to it in a moment. But the first time that I watched the film, I thought that it is kind of like, it felt like this really didn't belong to the film.
Really?
And there's a reason for that. It felt like a figurative addendum to the whole thing. It certainly added some weight to the message of the film, but Hichkas represents the lowest classes of Iranian society. And by lowest classes, I mean the poor people. And he even says it, that Man kafe in khiyabunha mikhabam, I used to sleep on the bottom of these very streets. And he has a kind of, I cannot even call it an accent, but it is very similar to a kind of accent of poor people from the southern parts of Iran. It's like a kind of ghetto accents. And these are some of the reasons that he became so popular, because he was the voice of the poor people in Iran, the laborers in Iran, many of those. And we don't really see any of the people from his class in this film. I mean, the main two characters of the film, although they are one of their problems is to find the money for the passport and visa and everything. But let's not forget, Ashkan, the guy, says that my mother is in Germany and finally his mom from Germany sends him the money. Or Negar says, oh, I have already been to the UK. It's very expensive to go from Iran to the UK. And they are doing rock in another language, and learning that other language, it takes money. So they are from the middle class or the upper middle class layers of Iranian society, while Hijkas is completely from another layer, another class of Iranian society.
Can I actually interject something for a second, just to ask you about, in the film though, he makes it very, very clear, right, that he's separate from them and different from them, and kind of speaks in a more, I think, kind of nationalist tone.
Exactly.
And made that, I mean, he makes it very clear, like, I don't need to leave here, right? Yeah. Everything I need is right here. And I don't know, do you think that that was a bit of Gobadi's point to do that?
Yeah, I think Gobadi really needed Hijkas or somebody like Hijkas in that scene. But the film, the narrative of the film, the protagonist of the film really didn't. I mean, did their music sound like they need a rapper in their music? I don't think so. Why would they need a rapper in their music at all in the first place? But Gobadi needed him because he wanted to extend the message of the film about the oppression.
And that's an American concept. That's very American.
Yeah.
They would get to try to interpolate a rapper with their music.
Exactly. And then, well, that scene by itself is a great scene. I mean, I think the scene by itself is a great scene, maybe not as much in connection to the other parts of the movie. The scene by itself, it's in a half-made construction, and it talks about a city that is turning, that is changing from the old town that it used to be to this mega city, to this monster that will swallow all the vulnerable people from this. Tehran is like the south of Tehran is for the poor people, the north of Tehran is for the richer people, and this city is just swallowing all these people from the south, and they are just workers who make these constructions for richer people to go and live in. So that's a great scene. But there's an irony here too, unfortunately. Hijkas, who said, my roots are here, I will never go. He lives in London now.
Oh,
that's the unbelievable irony.
Okay.
Yeah, he among many other artists, especially those who were involved in making this film, had to leave the country. He was in the country for a couple of years after that, but he finally left the country, and he's living in London now.
Well, it's such a great scene, though. I mean, and I can see where you would think like maybe it kind of sticks out, because it does seem like, you know, considering it certainly is more seemingly more protest oriented than the rest of the music that we hear. So I could definitely see why you would say like it seems to kind of drop in from an entirely different movie or subject matter to sit. So, you know, to ask you about, you've kind of touched on this already a little bit. I want to talk about the way the film kind of deftly blends documentary and a slightly fictional narrative in a very interesting way.
Yes.
Given the subject matter and what you know, this movie is presenting, do you think this approach is effective? Should Gobadi had gone straight documentary or made a fictional text about this, or do you like the blend of both styles in the film?
Personally, I like it a lot. Personally, I like it a lot, but it is coming from a tradition. It is coming from a very strong tradition, actually. Now, just to give a very brief context about Iranian films in general. Now, before the revolution, before 1979, there were three different kinds of movies were made in Iran. One kind was popular movies. They were called film farsi. This expression was coined by a critic that said, these are neither film nor really Farsi, nor really Persian. These were imitations of Bollywood films, American romantic comedies, and Egyptian movies. There were a lot of dance and singing scenes in these films. There were kind of eroticism and sex scenes that were supposed to be very sleazy by the standards of the time for the region. Iranian film critics hated those films, but people loved those films. They just loved them. And there were a few art films. These art films were very much inspired by Italian neorealism, French nouvelle vague, very dark, very realistic depictions of the life of people in villages and in towns. And there were the very few in-betweeny ones that wanted to make a bridge between the two of them. Now, after the revolution, popular cinema still exists. That's the part that I said we don't get to see that much. But there is no dance and sex anymore. But still, the trope, the pattern of narrative, all the tricks of the trade still exist there. And then there are art films that became more mature through time. In the 80s and 90s, a kind of poetic realism started in Iranian cinema, and the vanguard of it, for sure, was Abbas Kiarostami. And Abbas Kiarostami is the person who started blending documentary with fiction, and in masterpieces such as Close Up, or even No One, The Wind Will Carry Us. Both of these films, by the way, are on Canopy, and I don't know, UT people have access to Canopy, Kanopy. I don't know about ACC.
We do. We have access to it.
Perfect. Qobadi, by the way, was an assistant of Kiarostami in The Wind Will Carry Us. So Jafar Panahi, the famous Iranian filmmaker who made Taxi and several other films, Bahman Qobadi, Immerse, Ahmad, Mania Akbari, and several other now well-known Iranian filmmakers were all assistants of Kiarostami in different periods of his career. So Kiarostami trained them in a way. However, all of them later came to criticize Kiarostami a lot, saying that, oh, you are too apolitical. Your themes are too eternal, like death and love and life. And there is nothing about the situation that we're living in your films. Well, Kiarostami has his own response to them that said, I don't want to be political in that sense. I am political in another sense. But these new generation of Iranian art filmmakers, they didn't really, they weren't convinced. Qobadi, who started making films about, Qobadi is from Iranian Kurdistan, as I said, and he is very much an outspoken person for the rights of the Kurd minorities in Iran. But this film was his departure from even that, to going and talking that the minorities are even way more, that we have to change the definition of minorities in a way, because these people in the film, these musicians, these artists are also a kind of minority, are also a kind of people who are being suppressed. That's one part of, sorry, if I'm talking too much, please interrupt me.
No. I mean, this is the question I asked you. I mean, this is the context of it. Yeah, I mean, yeah,
that's one part to the answer, that tradition of blending documentary and fiction. But there is another part, and that is the important role of the cinematographer and the editor of this film.
Yes.
It is very interesting. I searched about them and I saw that, oh my God, yes, I have seen their work over and over and over again. I have seen this texture of movie a lot in Iranian protest dramas of recent years, of the past 15 years maybe. Both of them, Turaj Aslani, the cinematographer, and Haide Safiyari, the editor is a woman, they have collaborated with Qobadi and other filmmakers such as Reza Dormishian in different films with kind of the same theme. So that kind of disjointed feel of the different shots of the film or the different sequences, or that video clip like nature of the film, that is coming partly from the role of the cinematographer and the editor of this film. I think compared to many other products of Iranian cinema, the length of the shots are much shorter. The average shot length is much shorter. The palette of the film is much darker. The colors of the film are much darker. And the handheld camera movements are repeated a lot, especially in those small streets that I don't know where they have found them. It's not like the Tehran that I know, but they exist. So partly, I think Bahman Qobadi was very smart to intentionally use these crew to give that feeling in order to give us that feeling that, hey, we are picking at the real life in Tehran. This is the real life. Never throughout the film did I feel like, oh, this is a documentary. Maybe because of Hamed Behdad, the superstar. But I think I appreciate that blend, that mixture in the film.
Right.
I don't know. What do you think, Mark, about it?
And you know, now that you just, and I'm not as familiar with the actor who plays Nader in the film, but it never felt like documentary to me. It honestly, I felt like I was watching a film about the underground scene. I mean, of course, that's what it's about, but about the underground scene in Iran. I thought it was more fictional. And then to read that most of the people, most of those bands were actual bands, and to kind of see the way that he kind of, and something that now that you mentioned with Kiarostami that I definitely recognize from his work. And I'm trying to think of American films off the top of my head that have done this, that have played around with this. But certainly, I think about maybe something like the work of Charlie Kaufman, for example, like maybe Adaptation or something like that. That kind of plays in those same spaces, and does it in this way. But there is a realism, I think. You know, with Kaufman's work, there's something kind of otherworldly in a sense sometimes about like it's happening in some alternative universe or some alternative spectrum. Whereas here, I think there was definitely a reality that was attached to it that didn't take me out of, you know, the moment or the time in which we were in. And that's why I thought that, you know, it was really kind of close to that for sure. Yeah, but I liked it a lot. It enhanced what I thought about it after the fact.
Yeah, it is interesting that you mentioned Charlie Kaufman and that's otherworldly feeling of his films. One time I had this discussion with a colleague about Iranian science fiction movies, and I was telling him there are no Iranian science fiction movies. What are you talking about? He said, how could it be possible? And I said, well, maybe there are, but there are so few among these thousands of movies. There are so few science fiction movies that they don't really count. And then he said, why? My answer was, well, we are kind of living in a science fiction wall. When you are living that, you don't need to watch it in movie theaters anymore. But
right. And it's particularly when, you know, there are these other stories, not to say that science fiction, you know, that we don't need an Iranian, you know, science fiction film, but then there's these other stories that need to be told first that haven't had the opportunity, you know, haven't had a chance to be told. Which brings me to this question too about, you know, from the vantage point of Western culture, right? Most of the movies we see about Iran, if they're not focusing stereotypically on terrorism, right, then usually they're very somber in their narrative. So, you know, again, Kiarostami, Farhadi, you know, their movies are kind of somber, but this movie I thought was really lively. It kind of spoke to an ebullience, if you will, about youth culture that I really liked, something I had never seen. So I love the fact that I got to see a movie about young Iranian people. Most of the Iranian films I've seen are about older people. You know, or they're these working class, like, oh God, oh, you know, how much money do we have? We're poor, you know. And here's this movie about these young Iranian men, you know, young men and women that are starting this rock band and whatever. And I got a charge out of that. I thought it was just interesting to finally see something like that. And it's certainly different than what we get about Iran internationally. So how important is Persian Cats in that regard, that we get to see a youth culture like this in Iran?
Very much so, I would say, exactly because of the thing that you said. The film is not only about the message of resistance, whatever that resistance is against. It is also a celebration of life, I would say. A celebration of life as it is. There is a song by another underground rock group. They were in Iran. Now they have emigrated into the United States, and they have had a couple of albums here too. They're called 127, 127. And there's a line in one of their songs that says, "We're laughing under the gun." And that is so true. When I think about my life in Iran, when I think about all the crappy Iranian films that I have seen, all the other 80% that I'm telling you, I see that, yes, while there is this kind of tendency towards sadness, toward mourning in Iranian culture in general, which is partly coming from the government's interpretation of Shia Islam. At the same time, you can see satire, humor, different forms of comedy, and different forms of celebration of life in people and among people. And that's why I think Kiarostami was right when he was saying that my films are political in another sense. He has a film, for example, that he made after an earthquake in north of Iran, and he took the camera and he went to the place of the earthquake. And the film is titled "And Life Goes On." And it is about life among the people after an earthquake, including a young couple who got married the day after the earthquake, although they had lost a lot of family members there. So I think that message is also important, that even in the most horrible situations, people live and love living. They would be much happier if they live freely, but even with these circumstances, we shouldn't forget that right now more than 80 million people are living in Iran. Their conditions are really difficult, especially because of the sanctions. The poverty is horrible. The Iranian currency is now the worst currency in the world, and there have been different cycles of horrible inflation in the country, but still people are living, people are listening to music, people are producing music, movies, literature, culture. And I too, like you, Mark, I too wish that we get to see more of these demonstrations of life in not only Iran, but in other cultures in general.
Instead of like, it's always this focus on the, like you said, the turmoil and the disappointment, of these films, and a lot of times that we get in these spaces. And it was just really refreshing to see this. For me, it was. So I have a couple specific things to ask you about the film really quickly before we start to take questions. The dog scene. I think I'm probably asking about this more from my own understanding. Forgive me, audience, forgive me for this, but the significance of the dog scene in the film. Why does Gobadi put that in there?
Well, that's an important question, actually. First of all, again, some contextual information. There is a cultural difference between Iran and the US when it gets to animals in general. For example, a lot of swear words in Farsi are the names of animals. So if I'm really mad at somebody, I might just call their father a dog, which might not be something really that bad here, but that's very bad there. So that is partly coming from that culture that people in Iran, at least until recently, usually having pets was something for rural places, not for urban places. Partly because of the Islamic laws. In Islamic laws, there is a concept called najis, and I have no idea what it is. I mean, Shirin, do you know how can we translate najis?
I think it's like impure, or maybe the closest thing I can think about is kosher.
Yeah.
You know, or the opposite of kosher.
The opposite of kosher, yeah. Impure, unclean, non-kosher. So basically, there are some elements that are najis, and if you touch these elements, you have to do a kind of a ritual of washing yourself before doing your prayers, your mandatory required prayers every day. And these things vary from blood outside the vein, if you touch blood, or urine, or I don't know, different things, including a dog. Cats are not najis, but dogs are. Who knows why? So that's one reason, partly. By the way, infidels are another group of najis elements. So that's part of it. And the other part is, I think, the obsession of Iranians with cleanliness. In most of Iranian homes, you don't go with shoes on. You have to take off your shoes. I mean, you have to be clean. Everything should be clean. And then there is, as I said, the financial issues in Iran, which makes having pets a very expensive thing. So then again, the groups of people in Iran who used to have pets, and it is changing little by little, of course, because of this global village that we live in and all these media outputs of people and pets. Of course, in Iran, if you go right now, you see people walking their dogs. It's not like they're completely against it. No, but it's on a much smaller scale. So we have that, and then we have a ruling system that says dogs are impure. You shouldn't have them. So it would be possible that the militia or the state police confiscate a dog. However, in that particular scene, at least my reading of that was, they were not related to the government at all. They were like pretending to be related to the state police in order to just steal the dog and probably sell it somewhere else, which is doubly sad because it is against the advertisements, the propaganda of the system in Iran that, yes, we are poor, but here Iran is the safest country, at least in the region. Like, look at Syria, look at Afghanistan, look at Iraq. But here, everything is safe and secure. But however, if somebody steals something that belongs to you, you cannot really say that it is that much safe and secure. So I think one of the reasons that Qobadi placed that scene in the film was about that. He is very politically aware. He was very politically aware, and I think that was it, but I'm not sure.
Yeah. Okay. So really, one quick question, and then we're going to take questions. I'm going to start with your first question. Who was first? I didn't forget you, man. I did not forget you. So just for the ending of the film.
Yes.
I have to ask, and it's really a bookend, a film that has exhibited so much exuberance, a film that has done what this movie has done, and he give us this. I gasped when he fell out of the window.
Yeah.
I did. I was like, like, because again, the entire movie, I was like, oh, they're gonna get this band together. Oh, nah, maybe not. Oh, all of this, and then that ending. We get that ending, which again, he foretells. You know, we got the bookend at the very beginning, but did this movie need that?
Well, I don't know. Let me give you another long answer. Except for comedies, whether before or after revolution, except for comedies, many Iranian films, many popular Iranian films have had bitter endings when the lovers are not united, when the protagonist of the film, the hero, will die, especially before the revolution. Now, after the revolution, especially in the art films, we have that tradition of either open endings or unfinished stories. Again, Kiarostami was a master of that. By the end of Taste of Cherry, which is the film that won Palme d'Or, you never know what happens. Farhadi, by the end of A Separation, all right, the girl goes with the dad or the mom. I mean, what is happening? What is happening? Nobody knows. So it is partly coming from that tradition. And another part would be, again, I stress my point about the film being a very good example of postmodern cinema. Postmodernism rejects closure completely. And remember that we are facing a collage-like movie with different sets that at most times they are interchangeable, exchangeable. You can replace this with that. I mean, the narrative is not that much of a classic narrative. Yes, there is that overall pattern of crew gathering a la Seven Samurai or any movie that you want to, anybody that you can think of, but the different elements of that narrative, they're just very loose.
Okay.
So it makes sense that the overall structure of the film be circular. The film begins with the scene of the hospital and the boy in the hospital. The film ends with that. Does he die? Does he stay? We don't know. Even the girl just goes back somewhere. Is she falling down the roof or not? We don't know. I don't know. A
lot of people seem to think she did. I just kind of read a lot of critiques and order. I wanted to see what other people thought, and a lot of people describe it as suicide. And I was like, I don't want to believe that.
Yeah, me neither. Me neither. So before our meeting today, I went online and looked up for these characters. At least the actors are the two main actors are alive. And as I said, I mean, Negar has an animation studio company in the UK now, so something not related to music at all. But yeah.
Okay. All right. Well, all right. Well, let's take some questions from our audience here. So, Jafir, am I saying your name right? Jafir?
Yeah, it's correct. I just wrote it down.
No, understand. I just want to make sure I'm saying your name correct.
Oh, no.
No? Am I?
Yeah, you said it correct.
I said, okay, cool.
Oh, yeah.
A question. You want to ask it? Go ahead and ask it.
Too tired.
You want me to read it?
That sounds better.
Okay. Well, he has a question where he asks how, to you, Babak, that how does the Ayatollah in Iran feel about cultural history such as Nader, Shaghaghi, and poets such as Rumi and Hafiz?
Well, Rumi and Hafiz are different, so I respond to that differently. But in the first few years after the revolution, all these celebrations, all these non-religious celebrations were kind of condemned. So the decade that I was born in 81, so that decade of the 80s, many things were forbidden. Many things, especially Charshambe Suri. It was supposed to be, oh, this is what the Zoroastrians used to do, and worshipping fire, etc., etc., etc. However, things changed. and Nowruz is very much celebrated in Iran. Charshanbe Suri, which is one of the Fire Wednesday. It's the last Tuesday night before Nowruz. It is very much celebrated today. Shab Yalda, which is the longest night of the year, and people stay awake and read poetry. It is very much celebrated today. We didn't have any problems with the poets because many of these poets, they were good Muslims as well as being the voice of people. And they have shown us that you can have your religion and you can be like regular human beings and do what regular human beings do and be attractive to a lot of them. So no, there has been no problem with Rumi, especially, who is like one of the most famous Sufis of all time. And Sufism is not something that is that much frowned upon. It is kind of religion. It is a continuation of religion in itself. But again, I'm not a political scientist. I'm not an expert in those matters to give you a complete answer. But based on my own experience, yes, there was a day that even chess, the game of chess, was forbidden in the 80s.
Oh, wow.
But nowadays, it's not like that at all.
Wow. Yeah. Any other questions? I know y'all want to hear somebody else talk besides me.
I actually have a question for
Okay.
you. Yeah. As you know, we've had this discussion before that when I see an Iranian movie, and if you haven't figured out the audience, I am from Iran. I grew up in Iran and I came here when I was 17. But when I watch an Iranian movie, I'm so emotionally taken by it, don't have a good way of judging. Is it a good movie or not? As I've sent you like a movie, it's like, let's show this. And it's like, well, it's not really a good one. How did you like the movie?
You're asking me?
No, I'm asking Mark.
Mark.
Me, I liked it a lot.
Because you have the same emotional thing, probably. Maybe not exactly
Maybe
the same Babak,
did.
but no, Babak is probably, we're both from Iran. So.
You know what it is for me was I just liked, one of the things I liked about this movie was I was learning things that I had not seen before. My cinematic experience with Iran is these more somber pieces, these more meditative pieces. My history in terms of Iran is, I'm old enough to remember the Iran hostage crisis. and just kind of these stereotypical thoughts of terrorism and things of that nature. And to see this film that was completely different than anything I'd ever seen from Iran in terms of a film narrative, that's what I appreciated most about it. And I really did. I got wrapped up in their, I got completely caught up and wrapped up in their, struggle to trying to find band members. And I got into the music, and then, which is why I got invested with these characters enough that again, when he fell out of the window, I literally gasped like, oh my God. And then and which is why I don't want to believe that they got to, flip back over. So I connected with it in that way. And a lot of it had to do with the fact that, that I was getting to see an Iran that was, that kind of portrayed a youth culture. And these were young people, like I say again, who were vibrant, and young people who were, in pursuit of something that they really want to do. And they were artists, and I always love a good artist. So that's what I connected to with it, and I watched it.
Thank you.
Yeah. It is.
To anyone who is interested in different films from Iranian cinema, not the films that necessarily you watch in festivals or in academic syllabus asks you to watch that film. There is this website, imvbox.com, and I write it down here. It's like, I'm not representing them, of course, but they have a good collection of Iranian films after the revolution, all subtitled in English. The subscription fee is not that much. I think it's somewhere around $2 or $3 a month, something like that. So it's nothing basically. And they have some great films. Jaffer says $3 a month, so great. There is a film, by the way, that I think everybody here hopefully will like, because it has music. It is about different kinds of minorities in Iran, from religious minorities to regular people who want to live like Westerners, and African Iranians, which we do not see that much on the screens. And the film is called Pope, like the Pope in Vatican. So I really recommend that film. And the Farsi word for that, by the way, Bacha, is pop.
I'm gonna email you after I watch it.
Oh yeah, please do.
I will. Justin, you had your hand up.
Yep, I did. So I have two quick questions, or I guess two questions. One about production and one about themes. On production, I haven't read, what was the production of a film like this like? Mm-hmm. Was it completely run and gun underground guerrilla filmmaking? Mm-hmm. Was it even, I mean, did they have to shoot some of it outside of Iran, and do day for night, but for Iran? I'm curious about that. And then thematically, it was funny when you talked about how kind of what an upbeat film it was kind of going into it. It was so sad to me in the end, this Sisyphean task of trying to get out of Iran. So I'm curious, I don't want to like project too much onto the film, but should we read that theme as sort of emblematic of sort of a pessimistic take on Iran's own, or I guess the Iranian people's chances of escaping from that sort of authoritarian structure?
Well, thank you, Justin. The first one about guerrilla filmmaking. So the film was made in Iran completely. But was it a kind of guerrilla filmmaking that the film wants us to believe? Yes and no. The thing is, if you want to make a movie in Iran, if you want to make music in Iran too, if you want to publish a book in Iran too, you need a license, a permit. For films, you need a production permit. So you have to submit the screenplay to the Ministry of Culture and Islamic Guidance. You have to get the approval. With that approval, you go ahead and make the movie. Then you show the movie to the Ministry of Culture and Islamic Guidance again to get a distribution and release permits, basically. And the second one can have different shapes of theatrical release or DVD release or digital release or what have you. My guess is that Bahman Qobadi did not have a permit. However, by the time that he made this film, he was such a big name in Iranian cinema. He was seen as a combination of Abbas Kiarostami and Emir Kusturica, the famous Yugoslav filmmaker who has made the movie Underground. Highly recommended. So he was seen as a mixture of these two. He had made A Time for Drunken Horses, and his second film, the English title is Marooned in Iraq, but the Persian title, I like the Persian title better. It's آوازهای سرزمین مادریم, the songs from my motherland. And it's about a Kurdish singer, an Iraqi Kurdish singer, or a Kurdish singer who goes beyond the borders, crosses the borders to find the love of his life in the region of Kurdistan, the overall region of Kurdistan. So he was a very big name in Iran back then. And he got a great director of cinematography, a great editor, a great superstar to work with him. So it was like all these people trusted him. He would get a permit. He wouldn't have any problem getting a permit, right? So it was guerrilla filmmaking in the sense that he didn't have a permit, probably. I mean, I'm absolutely sure, 99.99% sure that he didn't have a production permit, 100% sure that he doesn't have a release permit. But it was made in Iran with professional crew. As for the tone of the film, happy versus sad, somber versus upbeat, there are parts of the film that are really funny to me. And the thing is, if you watch a Korean film and you know Korean, you get much more from that film than me, for example, who do not know Korean, but I love Korean cinema. The same goes with Persian. For example, the guy whose name is David in the film, they call him David. He is the passport forger. He has this little bit of Azeri accent, but he's a funny guy. And whatever he says in the film just makes me laugh. But on a review, like a few hours ago, on a review online, I read somebody said, oh, he must be a Jewish person or an American. And that made me laugh too, because no way, this guy is a completely an illiterate person who is fooling everyone in this film, and it is obvious. This kind of underlying humor, and I see a few faces from my media and migration class. We have talked about that even in the films that are about homesickness, or in the texts that are about homesickness, are highly nostalgic. You see this kind of satire or sense of humor. And sense of humor, especially when you are in an oppressed situation, it finds a way to say the things that otherwise you cannot say them. This film is not as much funny, but it is funny. The way that the musicians talk. It reminded me of many of my friends, the musicians, and the way that they talked, that the accents that they take upon themselves. And it is like this, it feels like they are not Iranian, but they are Iranian. Do you see what I'm saying? They sound like they're coming from abroad, but they are not. So all of these were funny a little bit to me. But of course, the end, it's at the service of Bahman Qobadi. And if it is not obvious, by the way, considering that this meeting is being recorded, I have to say that I don't agree necessarily with Bahman Qobadi. Everything is not so sad in that country.
Wow. Other questions? Yes, Ashley.
Going back to like the very first opening scene of the movie where in the studio the film is sort of foregrounded by Bahman's experience as like being a Kurdish director who's having all of these sort of censorship issues. I'm very familiar with like Turkish Kurdish cinema, and where you mention Kurdish and automatically your stuff is censored and banned just because it's viewed as separatist or something along those lines. I'm curious as to, in Iran, how that's sort of like dual identity in making different types of media and having it approved, what that sort of process is like for somebody who is like Kurdish or maybe from a different region.
Again, another fantastic question. So Iran is a multi-ethnic country, of course. There are Kurds, Lor people, there are Azeri people, there are people from north of Iran, there are southern people, there are Arabs in Iran, about like 2 million Arabs live in Iran. There are the Baluchi people, there are the Khorasani people, all different ethnicities, sometimes different languages, sometimes different dialects. Now, Iran is a country that has a standard official language, unlike the US. In the US, you don't have English as the official language. It is not part of the constitution. In Iran, it is part of the constitution that Farsi, Persian, is the official language of the country. So because of that, that has been a very controversial issue over the past few years, that many of these people, many of the children from different ethnicities in Iran could not study in their own language because Farsi was the official language. However, I think in the past few years, at least in the sense for education, the government has addressed the issue. So still everybody has to study Farsi, and the language of all classes are Farsi wherever in Iran that you go. But there are courses for different provinces of Iran that they learn the language of their own or the literature of their own, etc., etc. As for cinema and media, there are provincial TV channels in the languages of each province. So the province of Kurdistan, the province of Kermanshah, that have the highest rates of Kurds in them, they have Kurdish language TV channels. And if you want to make a movie for theatrical release, you have a very difficult job to do, because then your audiences would be much more limited, right? If you make a completely a Kurdish film in Iran, if you want to show it to the whole of the country, you have to subtitle it, or you have to dub it into Persian. Still, it happens. I have not encountered, now completely, I put myself aside as an Iranian, not as an Iranian, but as somebody who studies Iranian cinema. I have not encountered many complaints about, hey, we cannot make a movie in our own language. I have not seen that. However, of course, because of the market, and maybe because of other reasons, the chances of those films being distributed and released all around the country are much limited. Bahman Qobadi, as much as I cannot think of any other Iranian Kurdish filmmaker making a completely Kurdish film other than Bahman Qobadi at this moment, off the top of my mind, but there might be other ones. During the Iran-Iraq war, there were a lot of war films. You could hear Kurdish in those films, but not as the main language of the film. I don't know whether it completely answered your question or not, Ashley. But the question of those people who want to separate from the country, the separationists, in Iran, like many other countries, those groups exist, but the forces against them are not only via the governments. It is through the overall citizens of Iran who very much like to keep the entity of the country as it is.
Anybody else have a quick question?
Did you like the film, guys? Just a show of hands. Is there anybody here who hated the film? Okay. Good.
That's a good sign.
Hate has no place here. I'm happy about that.
Oh man. Well, this has just been incredibly enlightening, Babak. Thank you so much. You know, I was thinking really quickly, like I was going to ask you a question about this, but I think I'll just make it as a statement. You know, I thought about a long time ago having read Azar Nafisi's, you know, reading Lolita in Tehran, and kind of like what she had to go through to, you know, just to read literature, and how tough that is, how difficult it is, right, to freely engage with the arts in Iran, and what so many of us need to learn, I think, about just, you know, globally, we need to learn about how difficult it is for our Iranian artists and talents and professors and everybody else, right, to get the word out and to express themselves in a particular way, or to engage with literature or creativity in a certain way. And so just, I think this film really kind of brings that to the fore for us. And so it's been so wonderful talking to you about this.
Oh, thank you. Thank you very much for inviting me. Thank you for this discussion. Oh, I see a hand.
Oh,
yeah, I have, this is sort of off subject, but on the subject of film. Pre-World War I, pre-World War II, as there were films being made in all countries from the 30s on, how were the films, what were the films like in the 30s and the 40s in Iran before the Shah and before the Ayatollah and that kind of, I know that the coming together after World War I was traumatic for the whole Middle East. You know, we didn't do anything except tell you what to do. The British, the United States, Russia, they broke up a huge and vast empires.
Yeah, yeah. That question is very important in terms of the history of Iranian cinema. The thing is, when cinema came to Iran, a few years later, there were some films, some feature-length films made in Iran. Overall, 7 feature-length films were made in India and in Iran in Farsi. And it was in the 1930s. But then for a period of, I think if for a period of about 15 years or so, no feature-length films were made in Iran until 1948. Until 1948. In that time, there were many movie theaters in Iran, but there was a fight. There was basically a war between the Germans, the British, and later the Americans to show their own films in Iranian cinemas. And then many of these films became popular because of the Iranian dubbing industry. Now, Iran is a country in which subtitle was never popular, but dubbing was very popular. And as soon as the dubbing industry began in Iran, it became huge. So if you ask me about classics of American cinema right now, I remember them with Persian voices in the back of my mind. They were very popular, but for a variety of reasons, including the expenses of making that industry altogether. There was no film until the late 40s. But soon, starting from 51, 52, the number of films rose to 30, 40, and soon it rose to 90 by the end of the 50s. But yeah, before World War II, no. I mean, the country was in the process of being constructed all together, like the railroads were being constructed and the bridges and the roads and the schools and universities and everything. So maybe there was not enough money to dedicate to cinema, at least in that period.
And one follow-up.
Well,
you mind, Mark?
Well, it's
Okay.
about time for us to wrap up. So if you could do it really, really quickly.
It's just it would be during the Shah's time before the revolution. Were the movies more secular?
Yes and no. In appearance, yes, but content-wise, you could see a person who would saying Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim, a very religious thing, and then drink alcohol. So
Okay.
Oh, cool.
Well,
all right.
Yeah, well,
salud.
All right, well, thank you all. So again, Babak, thank you so much for joining us this evening to talk about this. This has been great. It really, really, really has. And yeah, so look for me to hit you up after I watch Pope, because I'm going to watch it over the spring break. So
Yes.
all right.
Yes.
Okay. All right. So, Shireen, I'll turn it back over to you. And
Thank you, everyone, for joining us. I know it's late. We've got in time for spring break, a list of films to watch.
Yes.
And it just whetted my appetite for more of the same. And Mark, thank you for your excellent questions, and everybody for keeping your cameras on and letting us see your beautiful smiling faces.
Awesome.
Those of you who could. And happy Nowruz.
Happy Nowruz, everyone. Thank you very much, Mark.
You're
Shireen,
welcome,
and
man.
Layla.
Absolutely.
Bye.
Thank you all so much. Everybody, have a wonderful one. Thank you.
Bye-bye.